Good morning, afternoon, evening, or otherwise, and welcome to episode 1 of Writing in Progress, a podcast where two full-time teachers share stories and lessons along their journey as aspiring authors. Today, we're going to tell you 5 reasons why our series is going to be worth your time. You know, beside the fact that we're pretty fun to hang out with. Are you writing a book? Maybe you've always wanted to, but have never gotten around to it. Sick of best-selling authors telling you you're doing it wrong while not giving you any actual useful advice? Wish there was a podcast where two aspiring authors, each in different stages and genres, talked about the writing process with the main goal of teaching you from their experiences? I'm Justin Creps, and I'm here to help you learn from my mistakes. And let me tell you, I've made more than a few.
And I'm Jon Woolley, coming to you from an empty bedroom in Columbus, Ohio. That's the only place I could escape my kids, which is what I read about, unsuccessfully escaping my 2 daughters. In this series, you'll learn about our writing process, what works for us and what doesn't. We're both going to struggle with motivation and consistency, and one of us is going to get his big break, so stay tuned.
So let's make this clear from the start. We are still in progress. Neither Jon or myself have sold a single book yet, although Jon is pretty darn close, which I'm sure we'll get to later on. If you want to listen to an author who has been through the whole process and experienced success, there are lots of great options out there, and I strongly recommend you check them out. We may even do an episode in the future listing some of our favorite resources. This podcast is something different. It's raw, it's real, and it's imperfect. So you may be asking yourself, why listen?
That's a great question, Justin. And that's exactly what our first episode is about. We're going to list 5 reasons why you should follow along with us and consider subscribing to our podcast. So with that in mind, let's not waste any time. Reason number 5. If you're trying to learn who better to listen to than a couple of teachers. Justin, quick quiz question for you. What do these famous authors have in common? J.K. Rowling, Dan Brown, William Golding, who wrote Lord of the Flies, Lewis Carroll, Robert Frost, J.R.R. Tolkien, and one of our favorites, Stephen King.
Oh, that's a good question. I would answer they all finished.
Incorrect. Nice try. The answer is they were all at one time teachers. They were all teachers.
Wow.
I would think William Golding would give it away with his story, Lord of the Flies. I'm going to tell you what, I had a 9th period study hall one time that book became truth. Stephen King actually wrote Carrie as a teacher in a junior high, and he saw how the junior high kids picked on one girl, and that led him to write that book.
As a junior high teacher, I could see how it could inspire a horror story.
Yeah. I think it influenced Stand By Me as well. So you're going to learn from 2 teachers here, and I think that's really neat. Actually, Justin and I know each other because we sit right next to each other in the teacher's lounge. And one day it came up, they both like to write and both were working on books. And that's one of the really cool things we share. And I think it's just cool to have teachers and teachers that are involved in a hobby of writing. And that's kind of a fun thing to learn about.
Yeah, we've been sitting together every day for about 6 years.
Yeah, I know, long time.
I think we were about 3 years in before we knew either of the other one wrote.
I know, it's like our hidden secret.
Yeah, I just kind of going along with what you said, I've seen so many authors list teachers as inspirations that made a difference and got them started, right? There's just something about having someone who buys into you, and teachers are good at that. Teachers are good at that. We've got experience, and hey, if we can teach 12-year-olds about science and engineering and all that stuff, I think we can help you learn a little bit.
You know, that played a huge part in my life. Is a couple of teachers pulled me aside and said, "You're really good at basketball, but you're also really good at this writing thing." And it was huge for me. And they don't even know that sometimes. They don't even know it. It's decades later that it comes out. So,
yep. Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Mr. Cleaver. He was one for me that helped me learn to love writing.
Shout out to Ms. Counts.
Nice. Love it. I think every writer has one, at least.
Yeah. You can think of someone in your head right now. That's who it is.
Exactly. All right. So moving along, reason number 4, counting down here, we're going through the process right now. We understand your struggles. And that's a big deal. There's something about being in the struggle that you can't quite relive or recapture after the fact. As a runner, I always think about when we're in a race and you feel like you're dying at the end of the race, and then you finish, and 2 minutes later you think back to it and you're like, oh, I could have gone harder. But of course you couldn't, because in the moment you were giving your all, and you can't really feel that after the fact. You can only feel it in the moment.
Right.
So I think that's something, as authors who are in the process, we might give kind of an interesting perspective that authors who have gone through the process might not quite be able to relate to after the fact.
I totally agree. And that's one of the things I was just thinking about. We understand the struggles. We understand this is a process and you can't shortcut the process. You got to go through it. And just like you said with running or any sport, you can't shortcut a marathon and training for a marathon. You got to go through the process. And writing is a process. And so many times I see writers become famous and they almost stop writing. And I wonder how tied they are to the process that you and I are going through on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree. And if nothing else, we can commiserate a little bit with our listeners. Because yeah, there are days, I've had a few recently where, you've been working on this thing for years and then you just read it and you're like, man, this sucks or whatever.
I've been there too.
And it doesn't, but in the moment you feel like it. Writing's very personal. It's very hard. I think every writer is a little bit insecure about what they've written, especially when it's your first one.
And sometimes there's big swings there. Sometimes I'll finish something, I'll be like, I'm a genius. This is the greatest thing ever. The people are going to frame this. And then I'll look at it a day later and be like, I just have to cut this part. It's really no good.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think if you look at like the first 100 pages I originally wrote for my novel, I think about 20 of them are still in the novel. like 80% of it has been scrapped.
Yep. And as part of the process, you had to go through those 100 to get those 20. And that's part of the process.
Yep, for sure. Number
3, some writing instructional resources can come off as judgmental or condescending. Not us. There's a million resources out there. I'll be honest, I probably have half of them. I literally have an entire bookshelf full of writing books. A lot of times they offer conflicting advice, and it's hard to wade through everything. There's also whole subcultures of people wanting to rip off people who want to write books. We're not those people. We have nothing to gain. I'm literally just doing this to help others and send something good out in the world and hope something good comes back. But the reality is I'm grinding it out just like you at home are. I'm grinding it out too and going through those steps.
Yeah, I think your point relates back to our first reason there of we're teachers, right?
Yeah.
People who become teachers usually aren't in it for personal gain, right? Those people don't typically seek out teaching as a profession. We like helping people. We like sharing what we've experienced. And honestly, if you listen to this and it's helpful, we'd love to hear from you.
Right.
That's why we're doing this. We want to help other people who have the same passion we have and just share our experience a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, not all, I don't want to stereotype or anything like that, but sometimes when you listen to people who have had the books published and have had success, they're great people, they can give great advice, but every once in a while it kind of feels like they're in a country club wearing monocles and sipping champagne and they say, oh, I remember my first book, and they kind of talk down to you.
Really squeaked out 5 million copies of that one.
I know, right? So I think sometimes it can just feel a little overwhelming. And we were talking about insecurities a second ago. I think sometimes when you listen to people who have had the success, it kind of feeds into that because you worry, what if I don't? What if I'm not good enough?
Absolutely. I think another thing is we're sitting here in the Midwest. I don't know anyone that's a professional author. I never have. I'm not on the East Coast. I don't know people in New York City. I don't know people in publishing. I have no ins. We're just doing it. We're just grinding it out.
That's a great point for sure. All right. So now we're down to reason number 2. All right. And something we noticed in our research as we started this podcast is there's not enough male authors contributing to the pay it forward nature of the writing community. So one writing community I love is Authortube on YouTube. So I searched Authortube on YouTube and I scrolled through the first 100 videos that came up, the first 100 hits, and 93 of them were female authors. And I think what this, and they're great. I want to make sure I say that right away. They are all great. I fully encourage you to check out Authortube. Some of my favorites, iWriterly, which is Meglator, and Alexa Dunn. They do excellent work. I'm 100% endorsing that. We'll probably talk about them later. But there is space for some male voices, just two guys talking about writing. And I think this is really a symptom of the fact that men aren't as good at collaborating as women are usually. We've kind of got the lone wolf sickness, as I call it, where we're all competitive with each other. We're not good at sharing and being vulnerable. And I think this podcast has the chance to be something unique with two guys sharing their struggles along the writing process.
Totally. I mean, how many periods do we sit for 30 minutes before we knew the other one was writing a book? You know?
Right. That's a great point.
Years.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about like picture a book club in your head, right?
Yeah.
Chances are you're not thinking about guys, right?
No, you're not.
Yeah. And why is that? I would say maybe I just have weird friends, but I talk with my close friends about books a lot. Some of my favorite conversations I've ever had are about a book we both read, but yet we're afraid to in public actually talk about it. We got to talk about sports or something like that,
right.
So I just think this has the chance to kind of enter a sphere that's not always available.
And I think one of the cool things about the writing community is how supportive it is.
Yes.
And how everyone's just cheering everyone on. There's no ego there. There's no, if someone gets published, we all cheer and say, this is awesome, good for you. And it's just cool to be in that community. And I need to be in that community more. And that's something that's become really, really clear to me recently is I need to step into that community and just give a lot of support to other people.
It has a similar feel. And I know you've run a marathon as well, John, but I've run quite a few of them, and there's nothing quite like that marathon morning at the start line where everyone is just so excited. And we don't get together like that as authors, but I like to think that if we did, it would have a similar feeling.
And one of the cool things I found running a marathon, having only run one and only played competitive sports before that, in a marathon, when people pass you, you cheer for them. And you say, great job. Keep going. You got this. And people cheer you on. And it's just this whole community. And I think that's what writing should be all about.
I agree. Yeah.
That brings us to reason number 1. Teaching from beside is sometimes more effective than teaching in the front. This reminds me when I first started teaching a couple subjects. One was one of my first years, I had plate tectonics. I'll be honest with you. I knew a little bit about plate tectonics. I had no idea how it fit with seafloor spreading, continental drift. No idea. And as I started teaching it, it became really clear to the students. I had no idea. So I said to them, hey, let's just learn this together. Me and you. You ask me questions, I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm going to go home and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to come and we're going to learn on this together. And that class and I bonded over plate tectonics. And it was awesome. It was awesome when we put it all together. And I started having surprises myself in class saying, oh my goodness, look how these things fit together. This is unbelievable. And they got excited. I see a lot of the same things with us. As we go through this process, you'll be excited for us. We'll be excited for you. And there's a lot of commonality there.
Yeah, I see it in teaching all the time. I mentioned Mr. Cleaver earlier, who was one of my big inspirations. When we would do free writes, he would write with us, and they were hilarious, and I think that was a big part of it. He wasn't just up there telling us to do it.
Right.
He was participating. I see it a lot in coaching. I coach cross country and track, and what I think part of the reasons why I have really good relationships with my athletes is because I run with them. I don't just stand and tell them to do this and run this many miles. I go out and run with them. And I think there's something, lead from behind, not from in front, all that stuff. That's just really a big part of being a good teacher. And that's hopefully what we can do with this podcast is we're right there with you. We're not telling you how to do it. We're figuring it out as we go. And if you can learn something along the way with us, that's what we're going for.
Exactly. I feel exactly the same way that, hey, we're grinding it out. An hour ago, I was writing something and thought, this is no good. And 2 paragraphs later, I was like, this is genius. This will be saved. The rest has got to go. And it was, I'm going through it just like you. Hopefully those reasons are enough to convince you to join us next Monday at 7 as we list out 6 things we wish we knew before we started. If that sounds intriguing to you, please consider subscribing via whatever platform you prefer. Writing in Progress is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you choose to listen to your podcasts. Where else can they listen, Justin?
Episodes of Writing in Progress will also be published to my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Justin Creps, with a C. While you're there, you might also choose to listen to audio chapters of my current work in progress, Awakening, an adult sci-fi thriller. Another great way to see what I've been working on is to check out my writing-centered Instagram page, J_M_Creps. Jon, where can people connect with you or see what you've been up to?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook under Car Seat Conversations, and on the web at jonwoolleyauthor.com. That's JONWOOLLEY author.com. I don't have a book yet, but I will. And so will you. I know it.
All right, so that will wrap it up for this week, our first ever episode. I hope you had a little bit of fun. We're going to keep improving and getting better as we go, so I hope you're along for the ride with us. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with us. We sincerely hope you come back and join us for episode 2, which again is going to be 6 things we wish we knew before we started, and that's going to premiere next Monday at 7 o'clock.
And don't forget, work the process. Process the work. Keep writing. You got this.